Hey YouTube, Hyckory Styck back with you again. It is September the 11th, which is still summer down here where I'm at. I'm on one of the private lakes that I have access to fish now, and the water temperature is still 90 degrees. Surface water temperature. Been fishing a jerk bait. I've kind of been alternating back and forth today, not really fishing any one thing in particular. What I want to talk about is a subject that my best friend and I got on a couple of weeks ago. He made the statement, he said, I've got to get myself a different reel. Ooh, that's a bass. That looks real big. Come up and snatched it. Hi fish, thank you for your patronage. Let me deviate for a second. Somebody asked me on one of my shorts. They saw me grabbing the fish with that pair of pliers right there, and they asked me, they said, why do you grab the fish with that pair of pliers instead of your hand? And the truth of the matter is, I'm typically a power fisherman. I fish a lot of treble hooks. There's another bass. Looky there, look at that. That's a pretty fish. Not a bad fish. These fish are a little lighter colored in this lake than in the other lake. Bye fish, thank you for your patronage. I have been impaled by a treble hook on more than one occasion. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't have any desire for it to happen again. That's why I grabbed the fish with a pair of pliers. Back to the subject at hand. So my buddy and I were talking. He said, I've got to get myself a new reel because the reel that I've got is too fast. I said, what do you mean? He's a finesse fisherman, or he's really a finesse fisherman, and that is his main thing. And he said, I find myself fishing too fast with soft baits, with worms and all. I fish too fast. So he said, I need to get a reel. He said, my reel's a 7-to-1. And he said, I need to go down to like a 6-to-1 or something like that. We got talking about it, and I said, I used to be the same way because I had developed. Oh, there's another fish. That is a fat little devil. He's little, but he's fat. Look how fat that little fish is. Hi fish, thank you for your patronage. But anyway, I told him, I said, I used to do the same thing. I had a bad habit of fishing too fast when I was fishing soft bait, or when I was fishing anything for that matter. It was because it was a bad habit that I had picked up really from fishing a spin cast reel, a Zebco 733. That's what I grew up fishing. And anybody that's ever fished a Zebco 733 knows that those things are slow as dirt. And I grew up working a worm with a Zebco 733, and in order to move the worm, I'd move my reel. I'd reel, and I'd stop, and I'd reel, and I'd stop. And I told him, I said, you know what, I had to learn when I started really, really bass fishing for sport, because I grew up, and he grew up the same way. He and I both grew up bass fishing to catch fish to eat, because my pawpaw liked to eat fish, and my buddy's dad is the same way. So we both grew up bass fishing to catch fish for the sake of eating. And when I started bass fishing for the sport of it, as I got older, I had to condition myself to never work my bait with my reel. You never work your bait with your reel. And anybody that's bass fished for a long time, this is old news to them. If you've been bass fishing and you've been sport bass fishing, you know what I'm talking about. But folks that are beginners, you may not know this. Never work your bait with your reel. And that's true for whatever kind of bait you're working. The only real exceptions to what I'm telling you now is something that is purely a cast and retrieve bait, like a crankbait. And even a crankbait, you only work your bait with your reel to a certain extent. Primarily, you're going to work your bait with your reel, but you're also going to impart some extra action into it with your body and your wrist and your rod. But aside from a crankbait and say something like a spinnerbait or a buzz bait, something that is by design a cast and retrieve bait, those you will primarily work with your reel. Don't work your bait unless it's a cast and retrieve bait. Don't work your bait with your reel. work your bait with your rod. That's why you've got all these different rods, folks. You know, there are more rod types on the market just about than baits. There's a rod for everything. These technique specific rods. And I'm a technique specific rod guy. I like it. I enjoy doing it. Do I need it? Does anybody need a technique specific rod to catch fish? No. You don't need a technique specific rod to catch fish. I can go down to Walmart and buy a rhino rod for $10 and catch fish. You don't need them. But I'm saying there's all these technique specific rods out there that can help you fish different bait and give a more natural presentation to different bait. But you have to use that rod to do it. You can't use your reel. What you're going to want to do, this is your example right here. If I can take this rod, this reel right here, and I can quick spin it like that, and that bait will move, and I'll bring that bait on in pretty quickly, you know. But what you want to do is you want to work your bait with your rod. You want the rod to impart all the action to your bait. When you're fishing, let's just say you're fishing let's put this down for a second. Let's go to this. This is just a plain old brush hog. Let's fish this brush hog for a minute. If I'm fishing this brush hog, when that brush hog gets to water, this is an 8-to-1 reel, 8.1 to 1. I can move that brush hog with this reel. Reel a little bit, he'll move. Reel a little bit, he'll move. Reel a little bit, he'll move. But the thing about it is, I'm moving that brush hog a lot. And I'm moving that brush hog a lot more than I think I am because of the gear ratio of this reel, which is what my buddy was complaining about. However, if I just use my rod tip, now I know how far I moved that brush hog. I moved that brush hog about a foot. And that's what I told my buddy. I said, you've got to not use your reel to move your bait. You got to use your rod to move your bait, because number one, you know how much you move that bait by looking at the right tip of your rod. And number two, you can slow down and you can use a faster reel. The point of your reel should not be to bring that bait to you. The point of your reel should be to take up the slack in your line. That's all it should do. Take up the slack in your line with your reel. The rod should move the bait. Does that mean reel speed does not matter? No, it does not. You're going to want to take your reel speed and you're going to want to match your reel speed to whatever technique you're using on that rod. And there is quite a bit of personal preference that goes into this. This is not hard and fast rules. This is a lot of personal preference here. This was the first one of these Shimano Curado 70s that I bought. Was this 8-to-1 right here. And I thought, okay, this is an 8-to-1 reel. I'm gonna put it on my jerkbait rod. Well, I discovered that it was a little too fast for a jerkbait rod and jerkbait fishing situation. Not because I was pulling the bait in with it, but because the 8-to-1, the way that I work my bait and the length of rod that I use, the combination of those two together, the 8-to-1 reel was causing me to, when I took up slack, I was moving the bait with the reel. You do not want to move your bait with your reel. You want to move your bait with your rod. And it's a big no-no when you're jerkbait fishing. When you've got that jerkbait sitting in the water and it's just sitting there suspending, if you move that bait with your reel and it just kind of moves, that's a big turn off for fish, for bass. It doesn't look natural. They're not going to hit it. But so if your reel is too fast and you're taking up too much slack, which is what I was doing, I was taking up too much line per turn, and that was causing me to move my bait. So I backed down to a 7-4 to 1 gear ratio on my jerkbait rods, and that is perfect for me. Now, if I was, let's just say I'm fishing 6'10" jerkbait rods. If I was fishing a 7-foot jerkbait rod or a 7'2", 7'3" jerkbait rod, yeah, an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel may work out fine for me. But with the shorter rod, I'm doing shorter strokes with the tip of my rod, and therefore the 8-to-1 reel was too much. It was causing me to move my bait with my reel. The 7-4 works out perfect for me. Concentrate on working your bait with your rod, and then once you have got your bait working with your rod figured out, then you can go and decide, okay, this ratio reel would work better for me with what I'm doing. Don't get wound up in, oh, I'm fishing too fast or I'm fishing too slow. My reel's the wrong gear ratio, is what I'm trying to say. Stop and give it some thought to, okay, I'm fishing too fast or I'm fishing too slow. Do I need to change my technique and start doing something different? Do I need to change my technique to work my bait more with my rod? Because the goal is working the bait with the rod. All right, so we talked about soft baits. When it comes to reel speed, we talked about soft baits. We talked about jerk baits. Let's talk about something like a crankbait. Now, this crankbait reel that I've got, this is a 6-to-1 reel. Actually, it's a 6-6-to-1. I didn't really know what I was going to want on a crankbait. I just had this reel on hand, and I decided to try it. Honestly, it's a little slow. You know, I fish a crankbait just like you see me doing. I'm either going to reel it kind of moderately and pull it, reel and pull, that, or I'm going to burn it. And let me tell you something. The 6-6-to-1 reel is a workout for your wrist when you're doing either one of those because it's slower. But I didn't know. It's something that I needed to learn. When I change reels, I'm going to a 7-4. I want it a little faster. I just wanted to have that little bit of a conversation because of the conversation with my buddy and I hope I have done a good job explaining it. It was really hard to put it into words to him when we were talking about it, and it's really hard again to put it into words here on a video. Hey, Duck. Hey, you're getting too excited over there. Too late in the evening now. Alligator gonna get you. See, they don't pay any attention to you. Try to warn them, give them some advice, they just don't listen. Don't know what to do about them. Ungrateful duck. Well, persistence pays off a little bit at a time. I just kept fishing. Unfortunately, the camera cut off and you didn't get to see me catch him, but that's a nice fish, folks. 17 inches. All right, bye, fish. Thank you for your patronage. Well, I hate to quit on that good note, but I guess quitting on a good note is better than quitting on a bad note. I hope I've given you some information that you can work with today. I hope it'll help you. Until next time, as always, this is Hyckory Styck, and y'all have a good one.